Tulsi is a liar. Like she was,
Really?
yeah, of course. She was, first of all, to be fair to her, in a deeply ironic way, she was always a secret right winger, but she was lying that she was a progressive. And so the first person to suss that out was Anna. And Anna did a bunch of stories about how Tulsi was a right winger back when she was pretending to be progressive and running for president in 2020. And people,
what is that? Is that like the gay marriage stuff or something?
that stuff. She's always hated Muslims. Like there's like, oh, she's like, I'm all for peace. Unless it's Muslims, then let's bomb them. Drone strikes and troops and go get the goddamn Muslim. I mean, they just all happen to be Muslim countries, and I just happen to be a Hindu nationalist. But it's just random.
Didn't she go to Syria? She was trying to.
Yeah, she went to Syria, met with Bashar
peace,
al-Assad. Nah, I don't know what she's doing, but she's not a progressive. So her going out there and pretending to be a progressive and doing right-wing propaganda gets under every skin I have. Okay, so, but now that gig is up, right? Or that jig is up. Like her, Glenn Greenwald, a couple others. I don't want to start the drama, right? But like,
you think even Glenn is?
Oh yeah,
a liar.
Yeah. So look, here's the thing. Again, to be fair to both Tulsi and Glenn, they had right-wing tendencies throughout, and Glenn used to do it in a principled way. So I remember we had a debate on Young Turks between Glenn Greenwald and Larry Lessig, who's like a legendary campaign finance reform professor and leader and godfather of the movement. It was right after Citizens United, and because we've been around forever. And Lessig was saying that Citizens United was decided wrong, and Glenn was arguing that it was decided right. So Glenn was in favor of money in politics. Now, he'll probably say some BS about, well, no, I'm not in favor of money in politics. I just think that politics should drown in it, and that it's like free speech, that it's awesome that all these companies bribe all of our politicians. But hey, free speech. So whatever that was, but back then, I mean, like that was out of actual principle, whatever, principle he thinks he has. So there was like a little right-wing tinge to him even back then. But now it's so over the top. Everything is, Tucker Carlson is so right. I'm a liberal, and I think Tucker Carlson is the most right person in the world. Like Glenn, we don't see it. Come on, brother.
Let's define left and right. How would you describe it?
So, but that's where we're getting into now the new world. Okay, yeah. So that frustrated me about Rogan and Maher and you as well. Like I thought, here we go again, pretending to be left wing and then saying things that are all right wing and going, see, the right wing's right about everything, right? But I now think a little bit differently about you three. Okay, I think Tulsi and Glenn are still just playing a scam, total utter scam. Okay, but it's Dave Rubin is a classic example of that scam. He also had like right-wing tendencies a little bit. He like loves, anything that's brutal on the Israeli side. He's like, occupation is great. Bombing the hell out of the Palestinians is awesome. So he always believed that even when he was pretending to be a liberal. So, but for like Dave, there's nothing left about him. Nothing. And no one thinks that Dave Rubin is left anymore. And as long as you don't think he's a left winger and you're not running that scam and you just say, okay, you're a right winger, then I have no problems. Then let's debate. It's no big deal, right?
I think even he calls himself conservative now.
Yeah. He gave up that shtick.
But what is left and right in your view?
Yeah. So I'm going to get to that through the answer of you, Rogan, and Maher, that new group, okay? So Maher's not a right-winger. Like, I get it, right? But does he have right-wing views? Yeah, he does, right? So he's terrible on Israel and on Muslims, et cetera. He's in the Sam Harris group. And there's a bunch of other things he's terrible on. But he's right about a lot of other things, right? He's right about Biden. He's right about at least half the topics. And Rogan is genuine. Like as much as like I get frustrated by Rogan and I think there was audience capture and guest capture and all of that, he genuinely means it. And part of the reason is he was already rich. He didn't need to do Dave Rubin like scams to get rich, right? So he's just has his own opinions. He's sharing them. They're leaning more right wing. But as long as it's genuine, I got no problem with it, right?
The more the left refuses to come on, the more you get conservative, right, libertarian, or post-liberal, whatever you want to call it, and then the more your views are going to be shaped by those that are surrounding you. You are the summation of the 5 people that surround you.
100% right, Tim. So, like I say this at the very beginning of my book, we have hardware and software, right, in our heads. So our hardware is our DNA and what we're predisposed to. So maybe later we can get into my hardware, which is complicated because I'm generally very progressive in my nature. But there are parts of me that are conservative, that like, I don't like change. I like staying in the same house. I like driving on the same road, et cetera, et cetera. So the hardware is a little complicated, but the software is the interesting part. Software is where you get all of your ideas from. And where do you get them from? You get them from family, friends, media, your surroundings, et cetera. The bubble that you're in. Yeah. And we're all in a bubble. And I try to get the left to understand, brothers and sisters, the right wing's not the only people in the bubble. Like, we think MAGA's nuts, right? We think like the election being stolen is the craziest thing that anybody's ever thought. And I believe that 100%. Okay. So they're in their bubble in our opinion. But we have our own bubble, right? And so, and our own bubble has some things that aren't true in it either. And I can give you some prominent examples in a minute. But now the new thing that's happening, getting to the core of your original question, Tim, is that now I sense a disturbance in the force. And before, everything was left wing or right wing, and it isn't that anymore. Especially in the last 6 months or so, I have started to see hosts who are no longer easy to define, okay, that have opinions that are in different parts of the spectrum. And then the best part of it is I started to see the audience in left-wing audiences, right-wing audiences, middle audiences, starting to have opinions all over the political spectrum. And that's actually a beautiful thing. And the reason that that's great is because these preset ideologies, just believing in them is irrational. Like, so what? We're supposed to be either left-wing or right-wing, and that comes with like 80 different policy points on each side. And somehow magically, we're supposed to agree with all 80 on the right-wing side or all 80 on the left-wing side. And that's not how humanity works, right? We wind up in different parts of the spectrum for different issues.
So I've noticed this too, because we've had guests on that I would probably describe as tribalist left, and they hold default positions you expect to hear on Twitter, on X or whatever, or in the news. And then we'll have people like Destiny on, and Destiny will give a well thought out, reasonable response addressing the points that were made and have a real conversation about where his positions are. The fascinating thing, I'm a big fan of Destiny. He's great. And he'll passionately say Trump sucks. Like, here's the problems with Trump. And then we'll have other conversations about culture war issues. And he's like, oh yeah, that's totally true and correct. Right. When he said he got in trouble on Twitch for this, Kyle Rittenhouse was the clearest cut case of self-defense he had ever seen. Yeah. And so, that's taboo in the tribal aspect of it. But I see Destiny as someone, he's just a guy who sees things and forms a moral framework around news, facts, and information. We might disagree on some things, but that's totally fine.
Yeah, I think Destiny is a great example of it, actually. And I was on his show too. And so then, even though he's to the right of me on a lot of cultural issues, so this is where the spectrum bends. It doesn't even make any sense.
Right.
But people in D.C. would say he's to the left of me on Democratic Party issues. Like, even though I'm running for president on the Democratic side, cenkforamerica.com, but I think Democratic leadership is awful. And Destiny is like such an interesting character and a bit of an avatar for the new paradigm, because he will not agree with the orthodoxy of some of the left, but then he loves Biden, and I think it's hilarious. Like he's genuine about it, so I don't mind at all.
Yeah.
Right.
Remember when they said that Kamala Harris was to the left of Bernie Sanders?
Yeah. And then, by the way, then Trump said that she was a Marxist and a communist.
Right.
Well, let's make up our minds.
What they were really saying was that she does not compromise with Republicans. So her voting record is almost more aligned with Democrat Party politics, whereas Bernie Sanders was willing to compromise with anybody to get a bill through, which shows, in my opinion, more reasonable behavior. But then the media narrative is because she's voted without Republicans, she's more left, which is like literally makes no sense.
No, that's a great point, because they actually do that to progressives all the time. That's mainstream media trick 101. Bernie Sanders is not a real Democrat. Well, but wait a minute. What does a real Democrat mean? The Democrats used to be the party of FDR. And so it meant Social Security and LBJ, Medicare and civil rights and voting rights and all these progressive policy positions, war on poverty, et cetera. And Bernie Sanders represents that infinitely better than Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. but the Democratic Party's become corrupted now. And so they vote for things that are not left-wing at all, that are just corporatist. And then the media comes in, which is corporate media, and they go, the corporate positions are the Democratic positions. These FDR positions are terrible right-wing positions. You're like, no, you're making up things that are weird and ridiculous, and that's partly why mainstream media lost all credibility. Claiming that Kamala Harris is further left than Bernie Sanders, you'd have to be in an institution to believe that. But that is how but they're tricky. They're liars. So they don't say Kamala Harris is more left-wing than Bernie Sanders. They say Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat.
Yeah,
and it cues the Democratic voters to think he's a Republican because he's not a Democrat, when in reality he's further left than the Democrats. The media knows that trick, but they go, technically, I didn't say he wasn't left-wing. I said he wasn't a Democrat. Technically, he's not.
Well, I think Trump and Bernie caused this fracture in 2015 into 16. Bernie was too far left, and they could not let him gain popularity in the party. They could not let him win the nomination. It was a meteoric rise. Donald Trump was called by Vox.com a moderate Republican, and he was actually taking more moderate, even right-leaning Democrat positions to try and generate mass appeal, resulting in the Democrats having to oppose whatever it is Trump was suggesting, and then creating this weird amalgam of neocons and neoliberals taking corporate establishment positions, which was then the left.
Yeah.
So, like, you got to... We try to have that. I have this debate very often with people on the right when they say leftists hate guns, and I'm like, no, the left they like guns. Liberals want gun control. There's a distinction there, but the media will only give you one narrative, and they try to lump everyone into the same categories.
Yeah. So the phenomenon you described about Trump and opposing Trump is, I think, 95% right, and it really saddens me, sickens me that the Democratic Party has been taken over by neoliberals and neocons. And I mean, just look at MSNBC. It's wall-to-wall former Republicans.
And intelligence officials.
And generals and former Republican congressmen. I mean, Nicole Wallace is celebrated. Like in D.C., she's the belle of the ball. Nicole Wallace, Trump resistor extraordinaire. Her job was very literally to be the mouthpiece for George W. Bush and Dick Cheney as they were starting the most disastrous wars in U.S. history.
How does George W. Bush, how has he recovered his favorability among Democrat voters? You've seen the polls, right?
Yeah. And that's what drives me crazy. So Liz Cheney opposes Trump. I think it's courageous, and I appreciate her for it. But I disagree with everything else that she says and does. You don't have to lose your mind and be like, Liz Cheney's now a good guy, and I love Liz Cheney. No. If you give her an opportunity, she'd start the next war in about half a second. And then then Nancy Pelosi hugging Dick Cheney. No, Dick Cheney is prime evil. So you don't hug Darth Vader because he's against some other Sith Lord.